In this video, I'm going to show you how to lay out and create value scales with micron markers using different shading techniques. So I'm using micron markers in 4 different weights. Now I'm laying out my paper. I put an inch border on the top, on the right. Now I'm making marks at the 1 inch, the 4 inch, the 5 inch, the 9 inch, while holding my ruler's edge even with 10 inches on the right side. Now I'm going to make 1 inch marks on the right side, and then I'm going to make them, well, I already made them, on the left side. As you can see, I sped this video up to 2 times as fast as I normally work. So if you need it slowed down a little bit, just pause and you can create your value chart. But I decided I was going to make bars that are 1 inches by 4 inches. I gave the 1 inch by 6 inch a try, but I found it was a little bit too much space to work with the markers. And besides, you're working on 1 inch by 4 inch squares, so it seemed like the right size. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to fill up every one of these. I'm going to work on every other one. The first bar I'm going to work on, it will show you how to use the hatching shading technique. Now, I wrote down the numbers of the pens I'm using. I am starting with the lightest one, the thinnest one, which is the 03. You can see that with hatching, I'm making all of my marks going the same direction. Now, when you're shading and building up value, what you want to do is get into a certain kind of rhythm as you're working, and that makes it more fun too. It's actually fun to play music and do this. Now I'm working with the 05 marker. As you can see, I'm going to keep the darker side on the left. Now what we're after with these value scales, and now I'm working with the 08 marker, is you want to create a graduated value scale. Now that word graduated, it sounds like gradual, and what that means is, you guessed it, I'm going to gradually get darker. So I want it to be sort of a smooth gradation, dark on the left and gradually getting lighter on the right side. Now I'm working with cross hatching, and I'm starting out with the very, very lightest marker I have. You can almost not see it. That was the 01. Now I moved up to the 03. You can see that I'm making marks in vertically and then at a slight angle. Now I'll change my angles several times throughout this value scale. So again, right now I'm working with the 03 marker, and now see how I just changed that up again? And now I'm going to shift my pen to the 05. So working with the 05, okay, then see how I just changed my direction yet again. So you keep changing your direction, building up the values, and using the thicker, darker markers on the left side, on the darkest side. Now, I suppose if you're left-handed, you might want to do it the opposite way. I don't know. So here I am. I'm still working with that 05. Okay, now I'm changing to the 08. And I'm really working up those sets of hatch marks and building up that value so it's nice and dark on the left. Now I went back to work on a little transitional area with the 03 because I wasn't totally satisfied that it was a gradual transition from dark to light. So it's fine to go back and, if you see that you need to work on that transition a little bit more. Now this is one of my favorite ones. I'm going to scribble, and I'm starting with a very light one, the 01, and I'm making really, really light scribbly marks, and so that will be my lightest value. Now I'm changing to the 03, and again I'm making those scribbly marks, but I'm overlapping the 0, 1 a little bit, so I get kind of a gradual transition there. So you don't want to have any jumps in value. You want the whole thing to be a gradual transition. Now you can see I am working with the 0, 5 marker and building up those scribbly lines right there. And that, honestly, that I think that was my most fun. That's totally my most fun one with the scribbles. So here I go, 0, 8, working with more scribbles. And just, and you can see when I'm working with the darker markers, I really keep them, the 0, 8, I really have to make sure I keep that on the left side because I don't want to use the darker, thicker markers in the light side. Now, miraculously, you saw those wavy lines get done. There was a little break in the video here. So I'm working with the 0, 3 on this and the 0, 8. I decided not to do the 0, 5. So now I've made a lot of thin wavy lines with the 0, 3, and I'm coming back and drawing on top or beside those lines with the 0, 8, and I'm pulling out that thicker line. So I'm making those thinner lines thicker, and then as I get towards the middle, I gently lift up my pen. So I pull the line towards the right, and as I go, I lift up on the pressure, so I have a nice sort of a smooth transition from the darker, thicker lines into the lighter, thinner lines. Then I start getting into it and and I decided I was going to go a little darker and a little thicker on the bottom. So I'm playing around with those lines. But I really enjoyed this one. And with the wavy lines, and you can see this one, I am trying really hard not to overlap them. So working on, yeah, and there I crossed off the 5 because I decided I was just going to do that with the 0, 8 for the thick, and then, you know, I started with the 0, 3. And so I wrote, try not to overlap. But that can be a really beautiful way to do some of the shading on your drawing, especially with cross contour lines that show the, that reveal the three-dimensional form and kind of map the surface. Now, this was kind of fun. This was the wavy overlapping line. So I'm still working with wavy lines, but I'm working a lot faster and I'm overlapping them. You can see that I started with a really, really super light 0, 1. Now I'm working with the 0, 3. And as I was working on that, it really felt like I was drawing fire or something going sideways. So I had fun with that one. Now I'm working on the 0, 5, and so I'm being careful with that 0, 5, not to pull it out too far. I'm also working on trying to make my wavy lines there cover up some of the white spots to get it darker. Now I'm switching over to that 0, 8, again building up those wavy lines and having that gradual transition. That was a really fun one too. I loved doing that one. And now I'm just swirling those lines around, and I had to watch that I didn't start scribbling. Okay, the final one is stippling. Okay, now stippling, some people love it. I'm going to use the 0, 3, starting with the 0, 3, and then look what I'm doing. I'm just making little tiny dots on the paper. And as I was working, I really started creating a little rhythm with that. Now I'm working with the 0, 5. And at this point, I decided, you know what? I am not going to shade that entire 4 inches with the stippling. So stippling is good when you're working on small, tiny little drawings. You can really control it. It's fun. You're developing this kind of rhythm that you're working with. And so now I'm working on with the 0, 5 and getting some of those dots a little closer to each other, making sure, I had to make sure that my dots didn't end up as little dashes. because I have a tendency to like to work fast and a little bit more expressively. So now I'm working with that 0.8 and really building up the value there and getting those dots as close as possible. But also keeping in mind that I want to kind of spread those dots out a little bit, working them into some of those mid-tones in the middle. That's how you can remember what that word means. Mid-tones are the middle values, you know, all the different shades of gray. Now I could have spent a little more time with my stippling. Now at the bottom, you know, those extra brackets are really for your choice, and if you need to do any over if you're not satisfied with them. So have fun with your value scales.